Chuck Norris had never expected a daytime talk show to test his patience more than decades of martial arts training or military roles on screen. But the moment he stepped onto the stage of The View, shaking hands politely with the hosts and taking his seat across from Joy Behar, a storm was already brewing beneath the polite studio lighting. And while the initial questions were tame, focused on his latest charity work and a new faith-based film he was promoting, the air quickly thickened when Joy, with her trademark smirk and theatrical timing, pivoted mid-conversation and asked Chuck, "Do you think America really needs more tough guy movies when we've got enough real violence already?" To which Norris calmly replied, "There's a difference between violence and discipline. And most of what I teach is about the latter." But Joy wasn't satisfied, leaning forward and quipping, "Discipline is nice, but doesn't that get lost when you support politicians who seem to do the opposite?" A comment which immediately shifted the atmosphere from conversational to confrontational. And as Chuck stiffened slightly, choosing his words carefully, he responded, "Joy, with all due respect, I'm here to talk about values, not pick sides." But Behar, sensing vulnerability, or perhaps just running on her instinct to press harder, shot back, "But you do pick sides publicly, loudly, and often on social media. So are you really saying one thing and doing another?" Causing the crowd to offer a mix of laughter and groans. And for a moment, Chuck just stared at her. The same quiet intensity that once froze movie villains now pointed at a talk show host. And then he said in a low, firm voice, "You invited me on to talk about helping veterans and kids, not to grill me about politics you don't agree with." But Joy, emboldened by the crowd and her years of battle-hardened broadcast experience, replied, "If you're a public figure, Chuck, you should be ready to answer hard questions, not just kick bad guys in the face." And with that, something shifted. Chuck's jaw tightened. His lips thinned into a controlled smile. He said, "If you wanted a fight, you should have scheduled a sparring match, not an ambush," removing his mic calmly and standing up as the other hosts tried to defuse the moment, Sonny and Sarah nervously interjecting about his charity. But he was already walking off the set as Whoopi called for a commercial break, the screen fading out on an awkward silence that would ignite hours of viral buzz online, and within minutes, Twitter and YouTube were ablaze with clips titled "Chuck Norris versus Joy Behar Live" and "Chuck Kicks Out of the View," each one dissecting every word, facial twitch, and body language signal between the two. And while Chuck's team released a composed statement later that afternoon, stating that he would not return to The View until it rediscovers respect, Joy doubled down during the next broadcast, opening the show with a tongue-in-cheek comment, "Well, I survived Chuck Norris. Do I get a black belt now?" Which triggered laughter from the audience, but thin smiles from the rest of the panel, particularly Whoopi, who reportedly met with producers after the show to express concern over the show's increasingly combative tone with guests. The next few days, public reaction remained sharply divided, with conservative circles praising Chuck for standing up to what they called liberal bullying, while progressive outlets accused him of dodging accountability and turning civil questions into melodrama. And yet, the ratings didn't live. The episode became one of The View's most streamed segments that month, generating headlines on every entertainment blog, op-ed pieces in major newspapers debating the role of talk shows in national discourse, and even a Saturday Night Live parody that weekend where Chuck was played by a silent, brooding stuntman who karate-chopped Joy's coffee mug mid-interview. And while some dismissed the skit as satire, others saw it as emblematic of a bigger problem in American media: the constant collision between celebrity and political punditry with no guardrails left intact. And as weeks passed, Chuck remained silent, reportedly turning down interview requests from every major outlet, choosing instead to focus on his nonprofit work and quietly releasing a YouTube video titled "Why I Walked Off," filmed in his ranch with a slow, sincere delivery explaining that he didn't mind tough questions, but what he objected to was disguising hostility as journalism, line that went viral again, sparking further debate while Joy, for her part, remained defiant, claiming on air and in interviews that the truth makes people uncomfortable and that's not my fault. Though privately some insiders began whispering about friction behind the scenes, with guest bookings reportedly becoming more difficult as publicists asked for assurances that their clients wouldn't be Joy mid-segment. And despite ABC's claims that the show remained a space for honest civil conversation, the Chuck Norris incident proved to be a watershed moment. It's referenced in future interviews, media classes, Twitter arguments as a classic case of combustible television. And even though Chuck never returned to The View, the legacy of that moment endured as a reminder that sometimes, even in the safest seeming venues, sparks can fly and legends can rise or walk without ever throwing a punch. The dust from Chuck Norris's dramatic exit off The View hadn't even begun to settle when deeper ramifications started unfolding behind the scenes at ABC. Executive producers held closed-door meetings trying to decide whether to issue a public apology, reinforce guest briefings, or subtly pivot the show's tone, all while social media continued spinning the narrative in 1,000 different directions, with trending hashtags like #ChuckVsJoy, #NorrisWalks, and even #TheViewClash gaining millions of impressions. And though the PR team initially tried to ride the wave of attention by pitching the episode as a bold example of unfiltered daytime dialogue, the blowback from certain viewer demographics, especially veterans, martial arts communities, and faith-based groups, was stronger than expected, with several sponsors quietly requesting ad placements be moved to less controversial segments. And meanwhile, Chuck's video message had become a lightning rod in conservative spheres, being played on talk radio, Fox News, and dozens of YouTube channels where commentators praised him for standing firm against what they perceived as ideological bullying, disguised as entertainment. And yet Chuck himself remained largely silent after the release of his video, avoiding any further statements or retaliatory comments, instead choosing to immerse himself in a nationwide campaign for children's fitness and anti-bullying education, even visiting schools across rural Texas, where he was greeted like a returning warrior, handshakes from teachers, cheers from students, and grateful nods from parents who admired his refusal to get dragged deeper into a media war. And still, that absence from the screen didn't keep him out of the headlines, especially when a previously unreleased clip surfaced of the green room footage before the interview aired, showing Chuck expressing hesitance about the direction the segment might take, even joking to a staffer, "Watch, they'll bring up politics before I finish my coffee," which, once made public, only strengthened the perception that he had been baited. A detail not lost on network analysts who noted a growing erosion of trust between talent bookers and high-profile guests. While inside The View's production offices, subtle changes began taking root, with internal policies updated to include a clearer distinction between pre-interview intentions and on-air execution, although Joy Behar herself remained uncowed. Continuing to host with her usual firebrand persona, though sources say even she noticed a chill from co-hosts like Alyssa and Sunny, who began tiptoeing around her during Hot Topic segments, perhaps out of fear of becoming collateral in another on-air clash. And that tension came to a head during a behind-the-scenes pre-production meeting 2 weeks after the incident, when producers allegedly confronted Joy about her conduct and its long-term impact on the show's booking reputation. To which she replied sharply, "This isn't Sunday school. We're not here to babysit feelings," a response that, while vintage Joy, did little to calm growing unease from the network's upper brass, especially as the show's demographics began to shift slightly, losing conservative-leaning viewers, who had once tuned in for spirited but respectful debate, and on the other side. Chuck's influence only grew, not just among his fan base, but among political operatives who began floating his name in association with various public roles, ambassadorial positions, advocacy,